The candles burned low in the great halls of Castile the night she was born, flickering like small, trembling souls in the draught that whispered through the stone. March 6, 1479. The bells rang in the birth of a princess, the daughter of Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, the monarchs who would later forge Spain into a single, unyielding empire. But for the child named Joanna, destiny would not bring triumph or glory. It would bring whispers, locked doors, and a darkness that crept into her veins long before the world called her mad. The making of a royal pawn from her earliest days. Joanna was quiet, too quiet, her tutors said. She learned quickly, spoke little, and watched everything. She absorbed knowledge like water through silk languages, theology, music, Latin philosophy, the kind of intellect unusual for a princess, yet dangerous in a world that only wanted obedience. Her mother, Queen Isabella, the iron-willed matriarch who had driven the Moors from Granada and sent Columbus across the sea, demanded perfection. Her father, King Ferdinand, was colder still, calculating, political. The architect of royal alliances took them. Joanna was not a daughter. She was a chess piece, and her fate would soon be moved across the board toward a stranger's hand. The marriage of beauty and iron in 1496. At just 17, Joanna was sent north to Flanders to marry Philip of Habsburg, son of the Holy Roman Emperor. The world called him Philip the Handsome, and he was golden-haired, tall, the embodiment of European nobility. When Joanna saw him for the first time in Ghent, her breath caught, not out of love, but AWD. He was beautiful, the way a blade is beautiful, polished, cold, and meant to cut. Their marriage, meant to unite Spain and the Habsburgs, began with passion, a fire too wild to control. They were inseparable at first. Courtiers whispered that Joanna could not bear to be apart from him, that she followed him from room to room like a shadow. But beauty, in Philip's world, was a weapon, and he wielded it cruelly. The poison of jealousy. Philip was adored by women, noble women, courtiers, servants, and he adored being adored. Joanna's heart, raised in piety and discipline, was unprepared for this kind of humiliation. She began to notice the perfume on his clothes, the soft laughter of women in corridors after midnight, the sudden silences when she entered a room. At first, she cried, then she prayed. Then, one night, she snapped. Philip had been dancing with one of his courtiers, a woman known for her beauty, when Joanna appeared in the hall, her eyes dark with sleeplessness. She walked straight to the woman, tore her hair, and struck her across the face before the entire court. Philip's laughter echoed through the chamber, cold and amused. "Are you mad, my queen?" he said. The word mad fell into her heart like a curse. From that moment, every act of defiance, every tear, every sleepless night became proof of her instability, and in a court ruled by appearances, madness was a convenient label, especially for a woman who loved too deeply. The walls begin to close in 1504. Tragedy struck Spain. Queen Isabella, Joanna's mother, died, and with her death, the crown of Castile passed to Joanna, though the kingdom was far away, and her husband's ambitions burned closer. Philip saw an opportunity. If he could rule through Joanna, he would command one of the greatest realms in Europe. But for that, she needed to be unfit. So the whispers began to grow. Philip's allies at court began to write letters, spreading tales of the queen's unstable moods and wild fits of jealousy. He began keeping her under watch, denying her correspondence, forbidding her from seeing certain attendants. And yet, through it all, Joanna still loved him. That was her curse. Her love was not rational. It was feverish, desperate, like a flame that consumed everything around it, including herself. The death of the handsome prince in 1506. Philip fell ill in Burgos. The cause remains uncertain. Perhaps typhoid, perhaps poison. Some said he was struck by a sudden chill after drinking cold water following a game of tennis. Joanna never left his side when the fever worsened. She begged the doctors to save him, offering prayers through sleepless nights. But on September 25, 1506, the man who had both enchanted and destroyed her took his final breath. For most queens, the death of a husband meant mourning, black veils, prayers, and eventual acceptance. For Joanna, it was the beginning of madness when they tried to take the body away. She screamed, clinging to him with such ferocity that even hardened soldiers stepped back in silence. "She will not let him go," one attendant whispered, and indeed, she didn't. Vi. The bride of the dead. 4 months after Philip's death, Joanna refused to bury him. She ordered the coffin sealed in black velvet and kept it near her chambers. She spoke to it, whispered to it, and sometimes, late at night, she demanded that it be opened to see if he still looked as handsome as before. The court shuddered when she finally agreed to move the coffin to Granada for burial. She insisted on traveling with it. The journey took weeks through winter rain, through desolate villages where peasants lit candles in silence as the eerie procession passed. Witnesses claimed she stopped each night at monasteries where no women were allowed, forcing the monks to open their doors so she could guard the coffin. Her attendants whispered prayers in terror, afraid she might open the casket again. And sometimes, she did. VII. The shadow of the crown. Her father, King Ferdinand, saw the horror of the situation not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity. If Joanna could be declared insane, he could reclaim Castile under his control. He rode to meet her caravan, finding his daughter, pale, disheveled, muttering to the coffin she guarded. When he tried to take command, she resisted, shouting that she was queen by divine right, that no one could rule through her but the court, the nobles, and even the clergy were already convinced the queen had lost her mind. By the winter of 1507, Ferdinand confined her to Tordesillas, a gloomy fortress in central Spain. There, in a small, dimly lit room, Joanna was locked away with the coffin of her beloved Philip. VII. The prison of silence. The corridors of Tordesillas were cold and echoing. The guards were under orders. No mirrors, no letters, no news of the world beyond the walls. They said she sat by the coffin for hours, whispering prayers, her eyes hollow and unblinking. At times, she refused to eat. At others, she raved at invisible voices. But perhaps she was not mad at all, only broken by grief, betrayed by love, and stripped of her freedom by men who found her inconvenient. Her father ruled in her name. Later, her son Charles, the future Holy Roman Emperor, would do the same, visiting her rarely, each time finding her thinner, quieter, fading like a candle burning without air. Ix. The woman who would not die the years became decades. Outside, Spain rose to glory, its ships conquering new worlds, its kings commanding continents. Inside, in that lonely fortress, the woman who had been Queen of Castile lived forgotten, her beauty long gone, her name spoken only as a warning. And yet, she lived. For 46 years after Philip's death, Joanna of Castile remained a prisoner in her own kingdom. For 46 years after Philip's death, Joanna of Castile remained a prisoner in her own kingdom, untried, uncrowned, unloved. The villagers who passed near Tordesillas said that on some nights, they heard singing soft, ghostly hymns drifting from the tower. Others claimed they saw a figure in black walking the courtyard by candlelight, always near the same sealed coffin. Perhaps it was madness. Perhaps it was love that refused to die. The fortress at Tordesillas sits on the bank of the river Duero. Gray stone, heavy walls, and a silence that swallows all sound. Inside, the Queen of Castile lived not as a monarch but as a ghost. Her crown stripped, her will subdued, her only companion, a coffin. The coffin of Philip the Handsome, her husband, her obsession, her curse. It stood in the chamber beside her bed, draped in black velvet that smelled of time and dust. Each morning Joanna would rise, draw back the shroud, and whisper words that only the dead could hear. To the guards, it was madness. To her, it was devotion. A kingdom of walls. The year was 1509. Spain was now ruled by her father, King Ferdinand, who claimed to act as regent until the queen recovered her reason. But he had no interest in her recovery. Her madness was his power. He ordered that Joanna's movements be restricted, her servants replaced, her letters burned unread. When she tried to step outside, soldiers followed. When she spoke of her right to rule, priests lectured her on obedience. First, she resisted, pacing her cell like a lioness behind bars. She screamed, demanded her crown, cursed the men who kept her from her people. But the walls did not move. The doors did not open, and slowly, her voice fell silent. 2. The coffin ritual. As the months passed, her rituals grew stranger. Every evening, she ordered candles lit around the coffin. Sometimes she would sit before it, hands folded, murmuring prayers. At other times, she spoke to it as if to a living man, telling him of her dreams, her fears, and the betrayal of her family. The guards said that once, during a storm, the candles blew out and she screamed, not out of fear for herself, but for the darkness surrounding Philip. She demanded the coffin be moved to another room so he would not be cold. Word spread through Castile. The peasants whispered, "Our queen loves a corpse." And thus, Juana la Loca, Joanna the Mad, was born in legend. 3. The arrival of the king. In 1516, King Ferdinand died. Spain mourned him as the architect of empire, but in Tordesillas his daughter did not shed a tear. Perhaps she no longer remembered him, or perhaps she remembered too well. Now power passed to her son, Charles of Ghent, the young man who would become Emperor Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire. When Charles arrived in Spain to claim his throne, he was 19, tall, austere, and cold as marble. The courtiers warned him, "Do not visit the queen. She is dangerous, unpredictable." But Charles wanted to see for himself the mother he had not known since childhood. The meeting was brief and heartbreaking. He entered her chamber expecting madness and found a frail woman in black, her hair streaked with gray, her hands trembling but her eyes lucid. "Mother," he said softly. She looked at him for a long moment, her gaze hollow yet sharp. Then she whispered, "You are his son. You have his eyes." She meant Philip. Charles froze, unable to reply. She turned her face away and murmured, "You came for the crown, not for me." And she was right. Within days, Charles ordered tighter restrictions. Guards now stood at every door. She was forbidden from speaking to strangers. Her attendants were rotated constantly, so no one would grow too sympathetic. The Queen of Castile had become a state secret. 4. The long twilight years blended into years. The seasons passed, the same small window, the same stone floor, the same echo of footsteps in the corridor. Sometimes she refused to eat, saying the food was poisoned. Sometimes she would not sleep, afraid her son's men might come in the night to take her away. The priests who visited called her mad, but when they left, some were shaken, because her words were not always senseless. She spoke of betrayal, of power, of how men used the word madness to silence women who would not obey. "If I were a man," she once said, "they would call me a king." The unseen war outside the walls of Tordesillas. Europe was changing. Charles V ruled an empire so vast that the sun seemed never to set upon it. He commanded armies, crushed revolts, and wore crowns across continents. But his mother, the true Queen of Castile, remained imprisoned. Some nobles began to whisper that Charles had no right to rule while she lived. In 1520, a great revolt known as the Comuneros Uprising erupted across Spain. The rebels demanded that Queen Joanna be restored to power. For a brief moment, hope stirred inside Tordesillas. The rebel leaders came to her cell, bowing before her, pledging loyalty. "Your Majesty," they said, "your people rise for you. Speak, and we will fight in your name." Joanna looked at them with tired eyes. She wanted to speak, perhaps she even tried, but fear and confusion bound her voice. She had lived too long in shadows. The rebels left, disappointed, their hopes crumbling. Without her open support, the revolt failed. Charles's armies crushed the uprising, and the Queen's isolation deepened once again. Via shadows and echoes after the revolt, Charles sent new orders. The guards were to ensure that the Queen was never alone with visitors. Her windows were nailed shut. The chapel bell that once tolled for her prayers was silenced. She began to age quickly. Her once dark hair turned white. Her voice grew weak, and yet she endured. When plague struck the fortress in 1530, she refused to flee. "If death comes," she told the guards, "let him enter. I have waited long enough." But death did not come. It seemed almost cruel, as if God himself had forgotten to call her home. The last years by her 60s, Joanna could barely walk. Her mind drifted in and out of lucidity, like a candle guttering in the wind. Some days she was silent for hours, gazing at the coffin that still stood in her chamber, though by now, the body within had long turned to dust. Other days, she spoke to the nuns who cared for her, asking about the world beyond the walls. "Does the sun still rise?" she would ask. "Do the people remember their queen?" The nuns would smile sadly, unsure how to answer. The final winter, in the winter of 1555, the fortress was colder than ever. Joanna was 76, thin as parchment, her once brilliant eyes now dim with cataracts. The priests came to her bedside, urging her to confess, to pray, to make peace. But Joanna had already made her peace, not with heaven, not with kings, but with silence. On the night of April 12, 1555, the woman the world called mad finally closed her eyes. No grand bells tolled, no armies saluted, only the wind moved through the corridors of Tordesillas, whispering through the cracks of the cold stone walls. Ix, the legacy of madness after her death. The crown passed fully to Charles, who never spoke of her again. The official chronicles called her Juana la Loca, a woman driven insane by jealousy and grief. But history, as always, is written by those who benefit most from lies. Letters from her attendants, hidden away for centuries later, revealed that she was not violently insane, as the legends claimed. Her fits were rare, her reasoning often clear. Her true crime was refusing to surrender her crown to the men who hungered for it. She was silenced not because she was mad, but because she was inconvenient. The ghost of Tordesillas today, the fortress still stands. Tourists walk its corridors, unaware that each step echoes over the same stones, where a queen once paced in endless grief. They say that on quiet nights, when the river mist creeps close and the moonlight turns the stones silver, you can hear the faint sound of footsteps and the soft voice of a woman whispering to someone who isn't there. "Philip, my love, they said I was mad," and if you listen closely, you might hear the coffin lid creak open, just once, before the silence returns. Epilogue, the beginning of the end. Joanna of Castile ruled for only a moment, yet her shadow stretched across generations. Her son became emperor of half the world. Her blood ran through kings and queens across Europe, and her story became a warning whispered through the centuries. They called her mad, but perhaps she was the only one who saw the truth, that in the courts of men, a woman's love is always dangerous, and her mind, when it refuses to bend, becomes her prison.